Hello, everyone. Welcome back to DJ and the Zooms. I am Jay. And today, as you can see, I'm recording from my couch. There's still a little F1 decoration. Please applaud me for being so brave because since I'm sitting here, you can see almost my full self, which means you're also seeing this and this. And yeah, I'm quite proud of myself for coming over this hurdle. But I am, as you can see, working on knitting something. It's a present for my goddaughter. I'm pretty late with it. Her birthday was a week ago, over a week and a half ago, and she deserves to have it as soon as possible. So I figured I might do both at once, record my podcasts, and keep knitting. Plus, I could not find the motivation today. I've been very tired. I know I keep saying that, but I've been exhausted with the new job, definitely, but also, I don't know, life, I guess. And it's been hard to find the strength, motivation to really record. So I figured might as well make it as easy as possible and not move the furniture around to be in front of the bookcases and have to get my guns out. Look at this. So yeah, we're on the couch today. I hope you like it. Anyway, this weekend was the Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka. What's interesting about Suzuka is, well, there's a lot of things that are interesting about Suzuka, but I like the fact that for most of the drivers, it is one of their favorite tracks, which is understandable. It's a speedy track, it's an interesting track, and they love it. You know what I like? I like when the drivers are happy. Yeah, I know, I'm soppy like that. Anyway, I did take quite a few notes this weekend. So I'm getting better at this. Again, another reason for you to be proud of me. Please say that you're proud of me in the comments. I need it. But anyway, here's the notes that I've taken, starting with I was watching, because as you know, I said it after the China Grand Prix, I would rather sleep at night. So again, I didn't watch FP1 or FP3, but I did watch FP2. And so I wrote, I know I said it's less pressure not fighting at the front, but being on track would be nice. Because again, Lando was stuck in the garage and there was another issue with his car. I'm trying to stay positive with this. I don't think it's interesting to put too much on it. And it makes sense. Like, logically, it makes sense that it's the beginning of a new season with new regulations, and everybody's got to figure out how the car works, the engine, the battery, and especially with now they're all having this issue of managing the battery. So it makes sense. But still, like, when you support a team or a driver and you see them struggle week after week and you see that the others aren't necessarily struggling in the same way, it's still, I don't want to say annoying. I feel like annoying is too hard of a word. But it's not fun. It's a little stressful. Yes, you know what? I think saying that it's not fun is the best way of saying it, because at the end of the day, it's a sport that we're watching for fun. And not being able to support your team or your driver because they're struggling kind of sucks the fun out of it, makes it less fun, especially since, and I know I talk about that all the time, but it is something that matters to me and matters to a lot of people who support Lando, and should matter to anyone who loves the sport, because you're supposed to like it for the entertainment, and if this is the reason why you like it, you're supposed to want it to be a healthy space to be in. And the way that Lando is systematically treated by some fans of the sport isn't making the space safe or healthy. And the thing is, people are putting a different sort of pressure on Lando to prove himself than they would have put on, I feel, any other driver winning the championship. A lot of people, no, you know what? I keep doing that, don't I? We'll talk about this since we're gonna have 5 freaking weeks of no racing starting from today. Well, as you are watching or listening to this, it's Wednesday, so not today, but I'm recording on Sunday. So starting from right now, we've got 5 weeks to go with no racing, or at least not for us. Hopefully they get to test the cars at some point during the break, because that would definitely help. But that means I've been sort of stressing because of that as well, because we've only had 3 races, and with the new job, I guess, I haven't been able to be as on top as I would have liked to be of the new regulations and the actual issues that are being uncovered by every team with the changes that have been made to the cars. So I feel like I'm really in the dark. Please, if you feel the same way, please tell me in the comments or wherever, on YouTube or on Spotify or on Instagram. Cause I've been feeling like, I don't know if it's me, if I'm the one who's behind, or if we're just being kept in the dark because no one can say really much about the issues that they're uncovering because they don't want to give away their own problems to the rest of the teams. Probably a bit of both. I don't know. But the thing is, I wish I knew more and I wish I understood it better. Since I've been so busy, I haven't been able to research it. So maybe I'm going to do that. What I was saying is I'm stressed that I don't know what I'm going to be able to say in the next 5 weeks. How am I going to still keep recording episodes with only 3 races done? And probably the way Lando's being treated by the fandom is definitely something that I want to talk about. And I know I've already talked about it a lot. But what I'm saying is I want to try to put my thoughts in a bit of a better order, try to organize what I want to say, because I have deeper thoughts than just, please stop being mean to my boy. Leave Lando alone. For any millennial who has the reference here. So yeah, we're probably going to talk about that at some point. But anyway, I don't like the fact that Lando's car has been so bad since the beginning of the year. I know that's rich, since Oscar had not been able to start a Grand Prix until today. Not fun for Oscar either. But this time he did a lot better, which is good. I didn't take any notes during qualifying, but I want to point out the fact that Arvid Lindblad pushed Max out of Q3, so out in Q2, which it's always so spectacular, right? When Max isn't at the front and he's not doing very well. We all know that the issue is mostly the car, but I think, you know what? I think we expect Max to do something supernatural with any car that he's given. He could be given a skateboard and we would all expect him to somehow make it work and keep winning races. But that's not possible, because this is an engineering competition, and if the engineering isn't at its best, you can be an incredible driver and still not be anywhere. That's also something that maybe we should talk about. The fact that people have such a short memory in this sport. Maybe it's the case in all the sports. I don't know. I don't watch other sports. So, and I don't care, to be honest. Let's be very real. I do not care about other sports. So maybe it's the case for everything. Probably. I think the masses when you've got like a collective consciousness. It's always going to be dumb because like a lot of people are dumb. That's not what I mean to say. But you can't expect the masses to have a nuanced opinion of anything, especially since most of the way that these masses can express themselves is through social media. And we know that, first of all, on social media, there's always a few people that are very loud and so are heard over the top of everyone else, even though their opinions don't necessarily represent what the entire fandom thinks. But also, it's not really places that are curated to allow nuanced and intelligent dialogue. So you'll have the most basic and mean opinions coming out of any form of expression on social media. Plus, that has been encouraged, unfortunately, by more traditional media because inflammatory and mean comments, scandalous comments, get clicks, and clicks mean money. It makes sense that journalists, publications, and online magazines, even TV channels would sort of press that button to get people to click, to talk, to react, so that they can make money. It's their raison d'être. But as much as it does make sense, it's still absolutely awful, which nicely takes us to something else that happened earlier in the weekend that we haven't talked about yet, but which was the talk of the ton at the beginning of the weekend. The fact that on Thursday, Max Verstappen refused to answer any questions in the press conference until a journalist from The Guardian stepped out of the room. Initially, and I do sort of still stand by that, I thought, good for him. Sometimes you gotta have boundaries and you gotta enforce them, and no one's gonna do that for you. So you gotta do it yourself. Especially since we remember the way that this journalist treated Max last year in Abu Dhabi and how vindictive he was in this search for the scandal, the inflammatory line that would get him a lot of clicks. From a business point of view, it does make sense. From a human point of view, it's absolutely terrible. And it's unfair and vicious because they know that it's maybe easy to get a rise out of Max. Max has been brought up in the way that he's been brought up, and now it means that he has maybe a bit of a temper, and it's not very difficult to push his buttons and get him to react in a short fuse kind of way. Moreover, we know that journalists in the British media, and not only the British media really, because that's easy to say it's British bias. I think it's a more global kind of thing. And it's been very much highlighted and worsened by Netflix painting Max as a villain. Now, that also makes sense, especially since Max drives for Red Bull, and Red Bull, until recently, painted themselves as villains. So it follows sort of naturally that Max, who is the face of Red Bull, would be painted as a villain. And he does have a short fuse, and he does react maybe in a kind of aggressive way at times, which he shouldn't do. I agree with that. But to use that and to attack him systematically and to try to push his buttons to get him to react in that way, even when he's trying to, because he was very clearly trying to be a lot more philosophical about the whole thing last year. It's vile. And what I said, because I commented on an ESPN post about it, when I said that it's good for him and he set a boundary and that's an example to set. I also said no one deserves to be publicly disrespected. I stand by that. I don't think Max deserved to be put on the spot in this way and so obviously pushed. Right. However, I understand the point of view of people who are saying that it wasn't a very mature way of handling the situation. Plus, it was 3 months ago, over 3 months ago, and drivers shouldn't be the one to dictate who's allowed to report on the races and on the racing and who should be allowed to be in the room during the press conferences. There was a lot of discourse about freedom of the press and freedom of expression, which I think is taking it too far. I don't think it's that deep, to be honest. But I understand that the international context at the moment means that this is something that is on people's minds, obviously. In the end, what I would say is I hope it means that people, journalists, and even people on the internet and people on the street will have that in mind and be influenced by it to sort of understand that you can't, first of all, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences, and that there's a humanity to have. Even when you talk to a celebrity, even when you talk to a driver whose job it is, that is true, to answer you, should you be an asshole in the pursuit of the clicks? And I think the answer is no, obviously. Unfortunately, it's not that obvious for everyone, and that's a problem. And so I still think at the end of the day, Max's decision is a net positive for the culture at large because it was important to say you cannot behave in that way in this context, especially since it's not just one guy disrespecting Max and they're face to face and he's being disrespectful to it's not a person being disrespectful to a person. It's a system and it fuels incredible amounts of hate towards Max. Because whatever it is, like, if he hadn't said anything on Thursday and had allowed for this journalist to stay there, then it sends the message that the way Max was treated in Abu Dhabi last year is okay. And so that it can go on. And if it can go on in this way, then why wouldn't it go a little further and a little further and a little further until I don't know what the end goal would be, but at some point or another, you do have to have boundaries. You have to put a stop to and say, this is the limit that I'm accepting. And the limit that I'm accepting is disrespect. I'm not going to let people disrespect me to this extent. And that says to the world at large, the fandom and all of the journalists, it says you can't do that. Case in point, I was watching the race this morning. I was obviously watching it on F1 TV as I usually do. And I watch it on the French broadcast, well, the Francophone broadcast with the Belgian journalist, as you know. And he had a guest and they were chatting and they were talking about that. And the guest said, well, at least you know you've got to be a little careful when you ask your questions to Max in the future. Yes! This journalist in particular, I don't think would disrespect anyone. He's a funny little guy. But in general, please keep in mind that these people are people and that respecting them is not an option. And if journalists respect them, it sets an example for the rest of the fans and everyone that interacts with the sport to say, this is a sport where you respect the athletes and you respect the teams. You always have horrible people, especially online. But at least you create a culture that says this sort of behavior is not acceptable. I think it's important. I think it matters, even if it ruffled some feathers, even if it was maybe going a little too far. But that's also something that I've been thinking about lately, more in terms of the state of the world than about the sport. But really it still applies, is the fact that you can't fight the bad side with sunshine and daisies. Sometimes you also have to be firm in trying to bring on better things for the world. And in this case, yeah, maybe in trying to show that respect isn't an option, you needed to be firm. Max needed to be firm. I am not mad at him for doing it. Next note that I wrote about this weekend was, because then we get directly to the race. So I haven't mentioned yet. I said I thought it was interesting that Arvid kicked Max out in Q2. Crazy. I think Arvid is definitely someone that we're going to need to look out for. It's not the first time I say it, and it's definitely not the last time I say it. Isaac Hadjar was also in Q3, as well as Pierre Gasly. Had to. So I guess it was a good day. Quali was a good day for the French, which I am French, so it was nice. But the next note was about the race. The McLarens starting beautifully. Oscar was probably eager after 2 races on the bench. Yeah, like Oscar just jumped right up and he qualified P3. I think. Yeah. Yes, because it was Kimi, then George, then Oscar. So he qualified P3. And on the start, he just jumped to first place. And even Lando gained, I think, 2 places at the start. So they seemed to be doing really well off the line. And obviously, like, Oscar hasn't been allowed to race for the first 2 races. He must have been so done with being a spectator, and he must have been so eager to be able to race with the rest of the boys, because that's also something that I say every time, like, they're just little boys and they love racing. They love doing that, which is why they love when they're able to fight and overtake, and like Ferrari in China, where they kept overtaking each other again and again and again, which scares us because we can see that the cars are very close to one another and we think they might crash into each other at some point or another. But for them, it's fun because that's what they love to do. And Oscar must have been so disappointed to twice in a row at the very beginning of the season not be able to go racing with the rest of his buddies. So it was nice to see him not only like actually start the race with his car, but also jump from P3 to P1 and stay close enough to finish P2. Was he? Yeah, I think he was. Kimi had a tough start, but I guess you can't have everything. He won his first race last weekend and he was P1 at the start and he qualified P1. Greedy little bastard. So yeah, he had a tough start, but then Ollie Bearman had a pretty scary crash. He completely slid off and had apparently a 50G crash in the wall. Fortunately, it was, I think, a tire wall or something. So it wasn't hard surface. But still, when he walked out of the car, he was limping. He seemed to be hurt, so not fun to watch. And I was a little worried. And then very quickly, like, you think, okay, he's probably hurt, but at least he's standing. He managed to get out of his car. And now he's going to have 5 weeks to nurse whatever injury he has and be able to get back on his feet and come back racing in Miami. And then we learned that he had an X-ray in the medical center. Nothing's broken. He did hurt his leg, but it's not fractured, so he's going to be okay. And in fact, after a little while, he was walking in the garage. I guess, like, when you bump into the car, it's gonna hurt pretty badly for a little while and then it gets better. But Ollie's crash meant there was a safety car, which arrived at the exact right time for some people and at the exact bad time for some people. So the people who had pitted just before, namely, I think it was so definitely Lando, as you know, I follow him during every race. But George unfortunately had just pitted when the safety car happened and he got a little mad. I think, and I'm not the only one to think that, but it's becoming very obvious that George is struggling with the pressure of being in the strongest and fastest car. Plus, he's also probably struggling with the pressure of having a little prodigy as a teammate, which is understandable. George, I remember, was it last year or the year before when he said I was promised a podium? And he had like a little bit of a tantrum when something happened. I think it's the same thing now, but at the championship level. Because at the very start of the season in Australia, it was very obvious that the Mercedes was going to be the strongest, fastest car this year because they were miles ahead of everyone else. The Ferrari had this great thing for the start, but then they struggled for the rest of the race. And so no one else seemed to be able to catch up to the Mercedes. And in that case, we all looked to George, thinking he's the more experienced driver, and he is a great driver. That should not be in question. So it seems obvious, like this year is going to be George's year. And then next race, gets beaten by his teammates, and then next race gets beaten by his teammates. And in this case, it certainly had to do a lot with the safety car happening when it did, and meaning that George lost the advantage that he had because so many people were able to pit and have like basically a free pit stop, and George was pissed. It's understandable, but it's also the name of the game. It is what it is. I did note something about yo-yo racing and the overtakes because I want to talk about that. So I noted it because the commentators mentioned it, and I have read that. But that is one of the things that I know I didn't look into deep enough because I've been too busy. I came across the term yo-yo racing. Someone had commented about this is how it happened when they were in go-karting, and in go-karting nobody calls it yo-yo racing. And the fact that the terminology is silly, and I think the idea, this is why I noted it, because I want to talk about it. I have opinions. Which is why I have a podcast. Hi, coming at you from a few days later, just to let you know that, first of all, the person who mentioned yo-yo racing and the way it was in karting was Lewis Hamilton. And second of all, to tell you that I've had some time to watch a few videos on the matter, and that now my opinion is more nuanced. But we'll talk about it later during the break when I've had more time to really put my thoughts into shape and form an informed opinion. Let's go on. I think that the way they're able to overtake now is great. I spent all of last year and the winter break saying, I hope that with the new regulations and the car being thinner, they'll be able to overtake a lot more and a lot easier. Now, as you know, because I've been saying it all episode today, I don't have the technical knowledge to know exactly what it is that is making these cars much easier to overtake this year. Hopefully I'll be able to find some information, but I cannot promise that I will be able to really do a deep dive because as much as I want to talk about it during this April break. I still have the big girl job, and it's not a very relaxing job, okay? So I need my downtime to be downtime. But I'm hoping to be able to find some info. But in any case, hi, it's racing. Again, it's the name of the game. Like, they're supposed to be able to overtake each other. And I think as easy as it can be is going to be a great thing, because that's what we want. That we want them to be able to get fast and get past people. How boring was it the past years when we had the DRS train and you had freaking Alex Albon and then 9 cars behind him just waiting? Nothing happened because they couldn't overtake each other. That's done. I'm not sad to see the DRS train go at all. Give me yo-yo racing any day. I want them to be able to overtake. It's so much more fun. Why are people complaining? Because they need to complain. People need to complain all the time. I should know that. I'm French. Again. So yeah, yo-yo racing, fake problem in my opinion. Next note. Oh yeah, I wrote another Ferrari battle. Charles overtakes Lewis, then George overtakes Lewis. Obviously, Lewis has less pace, which makes it admirable that he held on to third place for so long. Yeah, I stand by that. It seemed obvious from the moment, because obviously Charles was saying on the radio that he was faster and that he was losing time because Lewis was staying in front of him. And he said that because he expected the team to make the call to get Lewis to let him by. But as soon as Charles had overtaken Lewis, and we saw that George overtook Lewis as well, and then Lando overtook Lewis later in the race, but still he did, seemed obvious that just Lewis didn't have the same pace that Charles had. And then obviously the Mercedes and probably now the McLaren are just faster than the Ferrari when they're in good conditions. But still, like, it means that Lewis, and come on, he's not no one. He's Lewis freaking Hamilton, 7-time world champion, 7.5. So he, of course, he held on to third place, even though he was struggling and his car didn't have the same pace as the cars behind him, because just he's that good. This is the moment when I want to say, I hate the online culture in the fandom of saying, oh, something happened, this driver is washed. Come on, you know it's not. It has very little to do with the driver and so much to do with the car and the strategy. You know that. You're smarter than that. Next note is, meanwhile, Kimi's way ahead. Obviously, the Mercedes does wonders in clean air. And that is the thing. From the moment Kimi was in front of everyone, he was flying. So there must be like a real difficulty for the Mercedes car to handle dirty air. It's obviously it's a problem for everyone, but my next note is Pierre keeping Max behind. And listen, it comes back to what I was saying earlier, the fact that we expect Max to do such great things even with a soapbox. But still, I doubt that the Alpine is any better than the Red Bull. So it was really a feat remarkable on Pierre's behalf to keep Max behind him for so long and until the end of the race. I think I was I don't know if I mentioned it in the past, but I was sort of hoping that the Alpine could do a little better with the new regulations, because it's supposed to sort of a little bit level out the playing field, right? And I was thinking maybe these teams that have been at the back or the middle of the field could take advantage of the new regulations and do better. And at least Pierre seems to be doing his best for now, which is good. I think Pierre is such a great driver, and he really hasn't had the opportunity to shine as much as he should, but he deserves to. So hopefully we'll get to see great things from him. At least a podium would be nice. I'm hoping they manage to get updates that are interesting at the same time as the rest of the teams, because everyone's going to get updates and then upgrades. And then if Alpine doesn't do good upgrades at the same time, then they'll get lost and fall behind as they have in the past. So let's hope it doesn't happen and that Pierre has a chance to get at least a podium. Next note is Forza Kimi! So not only was he the youngest driver in the history of the sport to get a Grand Prix win in China, but now he's the youngest ever driver in the history of the sport to lead the championship and the only one to ever lead a championship in his teenage years. If that's not absolutely spectacular, let me tell you, my mom was so happy. And he was so cute during the national anthem. He's such an adorable little guy. So yeah, I think I said at the beginning of the season that I wouldn't be mad if George won the championship this year. Let me tell you, I definitely would not be mad if Kimi won the championship this year. We'll see. We're only 3 races in and the championship is long. So let's not put the carriage before the horse. But Iko Kimi deserves to be celebrated. But again, you know how I am. You know how I am. I like to celebrate people because I have such a big heart. The last note that I made was, and I thought it was important to point it out, the fact that Fernando Alonso finished the race. Obviously, he was nowhere near the front, but he went until the end, and that's a good sign. It means they're starting to get on top of that vibration issue, so that's good. Happy to see this. Now, we're starting a 5-week break that was not expected. So I don't know what I'm going to do and how I'm going to be able to fill in this very long break with limited time on my side, and not much has happened so far. I mean, a lot has happened, but it's just 3 races, right? I'm gonna look at that, what is it, closing speed thing? That caused Ollie's crash, because Carlos mentioned it. Apparently it's something that they've been talking about since the beginning. Charles also mentioned it. So I definitely need to look it up and see what it is and get back to you with some explanation. Although most of the people who listen to this podcast probably know more than me about it. Hi, guys. But yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, I'm hoping to I haven't talked to them about it at all, but I'm hoping to get Andy and Linus together to be able to talk about Aston Martin and their struggles and their Andy and Linus's views. And then I don't know. Hopefully crazy stuff happens. Silly season continues to silly, and I get to have stuff to talk about. In any case, thank you for watching or listening until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all the things that we do when we love a podcast and a creator, because I'm sure you love me. I love you. Bye.